Hey, Lon, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. Lon Hecht, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've been in sales for going on 30 years now, done everything from sales to sales leadership, started off in pharmaceuticals, went into med device, went into software, and then I've gotten into selling large enterprise deals to health plans and health systems, so tech-enabled type of services.
Wow. And why sales for you?
Growing up, my father was in sales, and he used to travel around the country, and I used to go with him. He used to do business opportunity shows, and I would actually go with him. So I just learned and picked it up, and it was something that I just knew I was good at. So I never really put a lot of thought into it. I just kind of felt like it was natural for me to progress into this.
And did you always feel at home doing it?
Always felt
Really?
at home. It just always felt right for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what motivates you as a person?
Well, I think that's changed over time. When I was younger, it was getting established in the wins and the money and everything like that. And now it's much different. Now it's more about helping other people come along in their journey, really teaching what I know, helping people become the best versions of themselves, and really helping companies. I like to help early stage companies. I'm with a large company now, but I tend to be very entrepreneurial, and I like to help early stage companies kind of find their footing and really grow. And healthcare has really been a passion area for me. So it's how can I serve as many people as possible, and how can I really improve healthcare overall?
But I got to believe that healthcare is pretty complex and difficult, isn't it?
It's
Excessive.
incredibly complex and difficult. And I think what most people think would be logical is absolutely not the case when you actually get to the level that I'm in and the depth that I get to. The things that would make sense to most people don't necessarily make sense to a health plan executive or to a hospital executive.
Well,
So
yeah,
it's
let's dig into that because I think a lot of people fall into the conventional logic when what really works is very different.
right, right. So yeah, to give you an example, so let's take health plan side of the business. Most people think that health plans, let's say a commercial health plan, and those are the ones that are serving typically employees and others. They just assume that a health plan wants to do everything that they can to reduce their costs, right? And costs are important, but at the same time, if you think about $1 of premium, a health plan is able to keep about 85 cents of that dollar. So do they want that dollar to be as small as it can be, or do they want it to be as big as it can be? If I'm spending $100 million, or let's say $1 billion in claims costs a year, and I get 15% of that, that's great. Do I really want it to drop down to $800 million where I get 15% of that? That's not as good for the bottom line. So although the intentions are very positive, there are just things that are kind of different than you would expect,
Yeah.
right? So you have to go and you have to understand their business very closely.
And who's making this decision, or how's the decision get made at this level?
Okay, so it really depends. I'm selling things that are tens of millions, hundreds of millions, even north of $1 billion. So they're very big deals. So there can be decision by committee, but also it can be the line of business head that makes that decision overall. So it really depends on what the audience is selling, who makes that decision. But there's a lot of committee decisions made in health plans, especially on that commercial insurance side of things. But I'm doing a lot more in Medicare Advantage and places like that. So typically, you might find that your line of business owner, which could be a president or an SVP of government markets, they are the ones that own that P&L authority. So they tend to be the ones that make those decisions. But they want everybody to line up. It's very important that others in
Yeah.
the organization feel comfortable with the decisions they're making too.
But are they the entry point, or is the entry point HR?
If you're
Or
smart, they're the entry point.
tell us why.
Okay, because just like anything else, you want to go as high as you typically can. It doesn't always mean when you're reaching out. Everybody says, "I want to sell at the C whatever level that is," and I think that's true. You want to try and be there, but they're not always the ones that are going to get into the nitty gritty. So it's important to start there, but sometimes you want to talk to them, give them an understanding of what you do, and have them put you with someone else that can make those decisions, and you keep them informed and bring them along as a part of the process. If you start low, you'll never get to that level. And that's where you really fall into the buying by committee, and where, the whole tail wagging the dog, and you're just not making any progress. And I think that's a big mistake a lot of folks make. is they get engaged in these conversations and they feel really good about themselves because they're having a lot of great conversations. But let's be honest, those conversations are never going to go anywhere, right? So you need to make sure you've got the right folks dialed up to be able to have those decisions made.
And it's not going to go anywhere because the competitor is talking to that SVP of that division. Is that true? Is that the reason?
Well, so most of the time, I actually find the competitors are the ones that are tied up in that low level decision conversation, right? And that's a good place for them to be.
Yeah.
I
Out of
want
your
to be
way.
having right out of exactly. So I want to have that conversation at a much higher level with them, and I will fit into their buying construct, right? If it's a decision by committee, I'll fall into that decision by committee, but I want to make sure that I'm wired in with somebody that can actually make a decision and steer a decision because that's
Yeah.
critically important.
Because the committee is kind of an illusion or a front to keep.
It can be, right? I mean, so if we're getting into the committee buying decision, now I try to do things that are outside of an RFP process. There's not a lot
Yes.
of RFP in what I do. Although in healthcare there is a lot of RFP, just not for what I specifically am selling. So I try to be around that. So if you are somebody that's bringing something to a health plan or a health system and you're helping them build that RFP out, that's a good thing. But if you're not that person, and somebody else did that, that's a really bad place to be. So you have to somehow go in there and change that buying criteria on the fly to be more aligned with what you bring to the table, or else it's lost.
Yeah. And for that executive, what's their criteria? What do they care? Right.
It depends. So it really depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about a lower level commodity item or something, no, they don't really care, right? They want somebody else to make that decision. But what we're selling is very high value and very costly and makes a really big difference for them. So these are the kind of decisions that can get an executive in hot water if they're not making the right decisions. So they care a lot. And it's really important as a salesperson or as a sales leader that I'm challenging that person that's making the buying decision to really think about the things that are important there. Now, it's not always comfortable as a salesperson
Yeah.
to push and have people, sometimes you have to ask hard questions, right? And you need people to change their mindset on it. And it's really important. They will respect that because at the end of the day, I want to make sure they're making a decision they feel comfortable with, but is going to be job security for them too, right? When you're making a $200 million decision or a $500 million decision or north. Those are decisions that can lose people jobs if you don't make the right decision. So I take it very seriously that I want to make sure that they fully understand what the decision is that they're making and that they're thinking about it from the right angles.
And when you first get in touch with them, they already have this frame in mind, their criteria or their values or what's important to them. Is that true or
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. With what I'm doing, I'm selling something that's pretty innovative. It's new. It's not something they
they
know
don't
about.
know
So
about it?
they don't really know about it.
Okay.
So I need them to understand that there's an option out there for them, but it's very different from what they're used to doing right now. So when I'm reaching out to them, they don't have a preconceived idea of what
Okay.
it would look like. I need to get them to understand there's a different option out there for them, and it's a really viable option. But at the same time, what we're selling is at such a high level that I don't want a lot of lower level folks brought into the decision making because when you bring some lower level folks in, I don't mean it in a bad way, but it's like they want to ask questions about what does this mean for my job and what does this mean for my job security and everything like that. I'm trying to talk about a decision that's going to move stock price right for them. Like these are really important decisions that they're going to make. So having a bunch of people in there that might be like, I want to sabotage this because I don't know if this works out well for me, probably not the right thing. So I have to go high and I need to keep that conversation at a high level until everybody's bought in, and then we can start talking to other folks about it.
But how do you do that? I mean, that's I think it's
Sure.
ideal, and clearly you've done
Transparency.
it.
I,
Okay.
I, so, so when you look at like, I've been around long enough that I know really what my core values are, right? And authenticity is a big one. So my customers or prospects, they know when they talk to me, they're getting the facts. I'm not I'm not going to tell them what they want to hear. I'm going to let them make a really good decision on there. So I want to bring everything to their attention and help them kind of figure out what the right decision is to be made. So when it comes to how do we keep people out of a buying process that are going to muddy the waters, I think it's very important that I'm transparent up front with them and I say, listen, these are conversations going to have a huge impact for you as an organization, but we want to be smart about who we invite into these conversations early on because you want to maintain that control and you want to maintain that narrative in your organization. If people start hearing about these conversations we're having now, that's when people start, making like stories and new narratives up and everything that's just not even appropriate for what's going on. So
Yeah.
I want to be upfront with that executive and let them know that let's have this conversation with a small group. And then if it makes sense, let's start bringing in the right people at that time. I'll follow your lead, but it's smart for us to be thinking about it that way. And keep in mind, most salespeople don't have the guts to have that conversation,
It's
right?
the opposite.
You have to, but you have to have that conversation or you're never going to get any.
Yeah, because I think most reps talk to the person they're most comfortable with instead of the
Right,
most influential.
right. But we don't get paid by having as many
No, we
conversations
don't.
as we can
Wouldn't
have,
that be
right?
nice?
We get paid by having the right conversations. And some like I mean, look, this is really detailed what I'm getting into and what I do, but it's not the one that speaks the most wins.
Yeah.
It's the one that resonates the most and helps them understand how it's going to impact their business the most.
And did someone teach you this, or is this something you learned trial and error?
So I've done a lot of the sales trainings that other folks have done, but a lot of this has been trial and error. I mean,
As it,
I started, I'm 50. I started selling when I was 22 years old. I mean, actually, I started selling when I was in high school, Wilson Suede and Leather and all these other ones, the little contests they used to have. So, but it's trial and error over time, and you start to learn the things that kind of work. I kind of feel like a good salesperson is almost like a good running back, right? You get to the line and you have field vision and you know where your blockers are and you know which ways to move and that takes time to really get comfortable with and learn but it's trial and error.
yeah. And how have you handled when it does come out RFP or RFI and it's the first you've heard of it? Do you
Yeah,
bother or do you
well,
pass?
so these deals are so big I would never not pay attention to a deal because there's a really finite audience. I'm not selling B2B software where I can
Right.
call hundreds of
Anyone.
thousands of millions of businesses, right? There are a certain amount of payers that are the size that matter, and when I say payer I mean health plan.
Yep.
So if I get that information, I first of all, I have a really strong network, right? So I know people in most of these organizations, so I can really back channel and understand what's going on. So they always want to push you to the person that's leading the procurement, and I will play that part. I will go there and I will get involved and I will listen and I will do all those kind of things. But I do want to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And if I look at those decision making criteria and they are first of all, I don't think they're right. Second of all, I don't think they're going to match up with what we're doing. I know I'm dead, right? I have to change that. And I
Yes.
know everybody says, well, if you go around me, this thing's going to fall apart. Well, I have to be honest with myself and say, this isn't going anywhere anyway, right? So I have to reach out and I need to go high level and I need to change some buying criteria and I'll do that. And it's a risk that I'm willing to take. But I can't just walk into a procurement where I'm not in line with other things and think I'm going to win that. That's just poor logic.
Well, let's talk about your network. How have you
Okay.
built this network over time?
So I think I remember when I was in college, I read a book. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I think it was Harvey McKay, How to Swim with the Sharks Without Getting
Yeah,
Eaten Alive, if you remember that one.
I
And
do.
it's about digging your well before you need it, before you're thirsty, right? So over the years, I've known a lot of different people, and I've worked at a lot of companies, and I've worked with a lot of execs. I'm really good about LinkedIn and making those connections, but that's just the surface level stuff, right? I need to follow up at a regular cadence with these folks. I need them to understand what I'm doing. I need to look out for them and see interesting things that are going to matter to their business and bring that to their attention. So I want to make myself a valuable resource to these folks no matter what. I may never end up doing business with 98% of these folks, but it's an important amount. It's important time that's invested up front to be able to do that. So I always want to be somebody that's a connector, right? If I'm in there and I'm talking to somebody at a health plan and they have other needs, let me connect them with the other folks that I know that are going to be helpful to them and get them right to the top, right? They want to, there's something that's an important need for them. I'm not going to connect them with the salesperson. I want to connect them with the CEO of a business over here that can really talk their language and can help them. and make them successful. So I invest a lot in these relationships. I try not to ask a lot, but there are times that I'm going to need to ask. And that's why you dig your well before you're thirsty.
Because most people dig the well when they are thirsty.
And it's obvious.
Right.
It's so obvious, right?
Yes.
How many LinkedIn outreaches do you get a day? I can't even tell you how many I get a day. And it's like, hey, I just want to interact with you. Okay, I accept that invite. Now all of a sudden there's a sales blurb right next. And it's like, that's not how it works. If you want to engage with me for like a month or two or three and then do it, invest a little time in me, right?
Yeah.
Before you go and do that. Because I'm never going to respond the other way.
Or maybe do something for you.
Exactly. Invest in that relationship.
Yeah. Do you find that salespeople today have a hard time with that concept?
Yes, I think there's instant gratification. And
Yeah.
everybody wants instant gratification. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I don't want to just pick up the phone and get a,
Million
$200 million
dollars.
deal and it's done, right? But that's just not how it works. So, yeah, you have to do it. So, and I do find that newer salespeople are looking for that easy kill, and it doesn't work that way. Our sales process is 12 to 24 months. Deals can take 36, 48, they can go on a long time, right? I am a rock star if I can get a deal done in 6 months. Because contracting alone and getting data from a health plan, can you imagine how hard it is to get data? You know all the HIPAA forms you have to fill out. Now imagine if I want to get data on 5 million members, how hard that is. So it's very complicated. It's a long process. You got to invest in the process. But the wins are so sweet.
Yeah.
They're so sweet.
And does your management understand this?
They do. Look, everybody wants to shorten a sales cycle, and I've made a career out of shortening sales cycles. And I know ways to be able to do that. Like if I look at myself and I compare myself to most other salespeople in my area, what would take them that long to do, I can do in this because I have a good sales process, and I know how to go into an initial meeting and get myself lined up for what that sale is going to look like and get them to buy into what the process looks like. But it's a give and a get, right? If I'm going to give, I expect to get. And if I'm going to invest all the time and resources to analyze data and do all these things for you free of charge, then when I come back, I want to meet with your CFO because that's a person that can make this financial decision. If you're not willing to agree to that up front, then I don't know that I'm going to be willing to put all that time and effort into data analysis. So it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to be there, but you've got to be able to do that stuff. And and
Because
that, and that comes with time. You get comfortable over time doing it.
yeah, because most reps feel comfortable as long as they're talking to someone.
Right,
It's
right. Exactly. And then they've got their bosses that are calling them, and it's like, we haven't talked to this one in a week. Give a call over. And it's once again, the person that talks to the most people the most time does not necessarily win. Sometimes management is hurting your deal by making you do these kind of things. So you have to be smart as a salesperson and understand that at the end of the day, you're responsible for that deal. If your sales rep, if your manager wants you to make all these calls and you think you're going to hurt that deal, you need to manage up. You need to talk to your manager and say, hey, this is not a good idea, and this is why it's not a good idea, and have the confidence in yourself to be able to push back. Managing up is a big part of your job.
and your sales process, is it written down? How'd you develop it?
So it's been written down at this point. It's not written down, but folks on my team, and I have salespeople on my team. They have a pretty good understanding of what that process is. But it starts with the research and the networking to get in front of the right people. I mean, cold emails. I see so many people that send out. I've sent out 300 emails today, and 200. It's like, good luck with that, right? Um, Good luck. So, it starts with the right research and the right messaging and getting in front of them. And then when you have that first meeting, it's setting up what that whole engagement is going to look like and getting that buy-in before you do it. And the key is when I do this, I expect you to do that. And when I've done that, I'm going to ask you to do this in return. And if you're not going to do that in return, then I'm not going to continue to invest in that relationship. We're not in the relationship, but in that sales process. We're going to have to do it. Sometimes you have to reshuffle the deck, right? Sometimes and I think people are so afraid to do that. I'm in a deal right now that I have to reshuffle the deck, right? So like we're going, and I can tell, and I'm a big believer of if you don't know you're winning, you're losing. right? It's kind of like Talladega Nights, right? Ricky Bobby, you ain't winning, you losing, right? Just kind of one of those. So if I'm in a situation right now where I don't know that I'm winning, I need to reshuffle that deck and I need to make it work so that I know that I am. Because if I don't know that I am, I'm not.
What are some of those signals that you're not winning?
I mean, when you're asking for something and you're not getting something back in a timely manner, listen, it's the middle of the summer. Everybody gets vacations. There are situations, but let's not convince ourselves that it's the summer and not hearing back for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks is reasonable. It's not reasonable, right? If you reach out to somebody on a Wednesday, haven't heard back on Friday, sometimes you need to slow your roll a little bit, give them a little time, let them breathe a little bit. But if you're not getting back what you were promised to get back, and all of a sudden the calls aren't getting returned, things like that, it's time. It's probably time to change things. You got to
Yeah.
change your process on that.
And how do you know when you're winning? You're getting that action, you're getting the response, you're getting the access, you're hearing certain words and certain.
You it comes with time and there's just a gut, but they're just general buying signals, right? um, they're asking you questions. The questions go from we're evaluating you to it kind of shifts from we're on two separate sides of the table to now we're on the same side of the table, right? And I think a big thing that salespeople really need to learn is your job when you go into these meetings is to really work in a way that you're both sitting on the same side of the table from the start,
Yeah.
right? But people are hesitant when you first get into these meetings and they want to understand you. So the sooner you can change that dynamic from I'm in here to present to let's ask some questions and let's share some knowledge so we can kind of get on the same side of the table, the better off you're going to be. And when you see that deal over time shift, that's when you know you're in good shape.
Yeah.
Things can change though. Things can change. So you've always got to be
Right.
weird. Yeah.
Because you don't sound like a salesperson. You're not acting like a salesperson, and that's your competitive advantage.
Right. It is. And here's the thing, you know, you have to be honest with yourself. You're not going to win every deal. You can want to win every deal. That's great. I want to win every deal. But there are times when you just know what you have is not right for them or it's not a good fit. It's okay to be honest with them and let them know that, right? Because they're it's a long-term process with these folks. These folks at health plans and health systems, they change seats all the time. They go from one company to another company or whatever. So it's really important that that they know that you're a good person and you're looking out for them. If I can't help you, I'm going to be very quick to let you know that I can help you. I'm going to try and put you in touch with somebody that can help you, or I'll let you know how I can help and how we'd have to change our way of thinking for it to work. But if that's not good, let's put you in touch with somebody that can help you.
Yeah. And do your reps, how long does it take a rep to really get this? Because I'm sure you interview reps and they're gun ho, knock down the door, hold them by the throat until they give you the order. A lot of people think that's selling as opposed to being on the same side of the table, partners in crime, essentially, where you're
Right.
both trying to achieve something together.
It takes time, right? So I have a job where what we do, I can't just hire anyone, right? There are very few people in what I do that are really good. You may have 100 people, and there may be like 2 or 3 that really know what they're doing, and there may be like 10 or 15 that may hit their quota, and then the rest typically don't know what they're doing. So it's hard to find the right person in the first place. But a lot of that is, and I believe you really need to be out there with your salespeople and you need to let them kind of model what good questioning and good behavior looks like. So yesterday I was out at a meeting and it's like subtle little things. I could tell in our meeting yesterday that well, I don't want to give too much of it away, just but I could tell that the decision making criteria needed to change a little bit, and we had an ace in the hole in something that could be really good. So it was just the right questioning to kind of get that mindset shift, and it happened. And it happened very quickly. And I think we're walking out, and I think we're going to end up winning that business,
Yeah.
right? So,
And is it typically a competitor that's creating this buying criteria, or is it internal misunderstanding or assumptions or conventional logic that?
so it can be a competitor. it's typically not a competitor. I think most of these health, I'm not that concerned about the competitors that are out there because once again, there aren't that many people that are that good at this and understand what they're doing. So a lot of this is just preconceived notions of what you think is going to be important. And I think every health plan and every health system wants to think that everything they're buying is a commodity, but they're not, right? And it's really important for me to help them understand that even though all else is equal over here, this one thing is really important. And this is why that matters. And that's why you can't be thinking about another direction other than our direction. So, yeah.
So you get them focused on total cost of ownership instead of unit cost?
Well, I think value is a critical one,
Yeah.
right? Um, Everybody wants to focus on price, but value is the real key. And I think the other thing is when you look at like a health system or a health plan, quality, things like that really matter. Like if you're a health plan, if you think about it, um, health plans really care about their network, the doctors that are in there. Doctors may feel like they're powerless. They're not. And I apologize for all these messages in the background. I really do. It would take me too much time to change the setting right now, so I'll let it go. But doctors feel like they're powerless. They're not. Their network matters. So if you're going to do something that's going to disrupt their network and it's going to come back to them, that hurts because that's going to impact their patients and quality and different things like that. And plans are judged on quality, and you have to understand what that criteria is and how important it is to them. And if you're looking at like Medicare Advantage, if their quality is higher, they get paid a lot more money from the government. So it's aligning those incentives, right? It's like people look at things and it's like, well, hey, I want to save money over here. Well, that's great, but you could save money. But how about if we changed our thinking a little bit and we improved your revenue too, right? We can reduce your expenses, but we can improve that revenue, and that helps, tremendously. So it's about trying to get people to think about things a little bit differently.
Yeah. And what lesson that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started in B2B sales?
There are just so many lessons. Um, I don't even know where to begin, but I'll say one that I think is a really big one, and I think it's how important consistency is. And you find salespeople that want to do all the busy work, to do everything, not to do the hard stuff, but it's the hard stuff that typically is what makes your quota happen. So you have to hit the hard stuff hard and quickly, and you have to block time out for it. So if you're listening and you're in sales and it's like you should block off 8 to 11 in the morning for nothing but outreach. That's what you should be doing every single day. And I don't know if that's the right number for you and your business. It depends on how many prospects you have and everything like that, but those hard things, the dialing for dollars, is what matters, and you can't back away from that. So I think if I could go back, it would be realizing that I need to focus on the key metrics now. And I've got to block that time out no matter what happens and let nothing else get in the way. All the reports and the sales force and this and that, all that stuff's important, but this is what's going to make me money.
Yeah. And it's not dialing and pitching, it's dialing and building a conversation that
It
turns into
is.
a relationship.
It really is.
Yeah. And when did that mindset develop? Because that's very different than what most of us are taught.
Right. Actually, it started early. It's funny. I mentioned I did pharma, med device, software, and then into this. And my mindset changed kind of throughout, right? When I was in pharma, I learned how to do presentations with the old,
The
here, here,
board.
here
Yeah.
with my pen, right? And it was more talking to rather than engaging in
With.
conversation. And then medical device is where I learned how to street fight. My kid was eating or their kid was eating. And it was one of those. Then all of a sudden, software became, let's have a conversation and let's get strategic. That's when I think things started to really change for me. And then when I got into this tech-enabled services and in the health plan world, that's really when things really took hold. So it takes time, and you have to be patient with yourself as a representative, kind of building through your career.
And to go through essentially 3 or 4 different industries, you had to be your own sales coach, right? You had to change your approach, your mindset, your skill set.
Absolutely,
Because if you took the med device approach in this job, you'd
never work.
starve.
Yeah, yeah. This job is like no other, and that's why so few people are good at what we do. But if you're good at what you do here, you will make a lot of money for a long period of time.
Well, I can see a lot of people falling into the trap of not doing top down, but bottom up,
Right.
which is be a disaster.
It is.
And to do top down requires a huge skill set.
It does.
Yeah.
It requires a skill set. It also requires being fearless, right? You have to, and it's funny. My son many years ago, he's a was a pitcher, right? And he was good, like he was a good pitcher, but just the body language and everything like that was off. And his coach had him watch the TED Talk, the what is it, fake it till you make it, or fake it
Yeah.
until you become it, or whatever. And it's amazing how watching that and just kind of changing your mindset and your body language and everything like that, all of a sudden he started to psych out those hitters, right? And his game transformed. And I think it's the same kind of thing here, right? If you're not that confident, fake it until you get confident enough to be there. You belong there. And that's the thing people have to understand is, yes, we're salespeople, but we belong here. We're educating a market on something they probably don't know enough about. I know more about what I do in this industry than anybody else does, right? So we just because they're the CEO of a health plan doesn't mean that they understand my piece as well as they should and could really get some good positive coaching out of it from me on where that is. So believe in yourself and believe that you belong there. That's really critical.
And that's what they want from you.
Right. Right.
They want an industry expert telling them what they're missing.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's been a
Exactly.
great conversation. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Probably LinkedIn would be the best place. So Lon Hecht, LON, last name is HECHT. Happy to connect.